Welcome to the second day of the final seminar on the course for the Toolbox for root, tuber, and banana seed systems. Hello there, everyone. I see we have everyone has joined us and more are pouring in all the time. So welcome. My name is Jeff Bentley. I'm your facilitator, and we're delighted to have you back for the second of 3 days. Today is Tanzania. Before we have the pleasure of hearing from the Tanzania team, we'd like to turn the floor over to Connie Almakinders. She is a professor at Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands, and she's going to review the day for us yesterday. She's also the co-leader of the Toolbox team.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I hope that the wonderful people in Lima can get my presentation on, because I'm not so good with screens. So Lawrence, you cannot do anything worse than I do later on. So hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Jeff said, I'd like to recap for a moment and actually use this recap to bring you back to what this toolbox actually is and how we got here today. Maybe next slide. You can find everything on the RTB toolbox through our website. And on that website, you also will find this short animated video, which we used earlier this year to launch the toolbox. And it gives you a good introduction to what the toolbox is. So please let us have a look.
1/3 of calories in low-income countries are met through root, tuber, and banana crops such as potato, sweet potato, yam, cassava, and banana. These are very important for the food security of the poorest. But these crops are vegetatively propagated. Their seed is bulky, perishable, and prone to buildup of pests and diseases. So seed systems of root, tuber, and banana crops are complex. This introduces a series of challenges. One challenge is the adoption of new varieties. Breeders develop improved varieties with farmer and market preferred traits, tolerant to heat and drought. To make sure the work of breeders pays off, farmers need functional seed systems to access quality seeds of new varieties. A group of social and biophysical scientists drawn from CGIAR, National Agricultural Research Systems, and universities have developed a toolbox called Tools for Seed Systems for working with root, tuber, and banana crops. The tools address knowledge gaps such as capturing variety and seed demand characteristics of different types of farmers, appropriate seed delivery pathways, seed health management, and appropriate seed regulatory frameworks. The toolbox brings together proven methods that successfully work to diagnose, plan, and improve seed systems. There are 11 tools and a glossary which National Agricultural Research Systems, non-governmental organizations, and decision makers use to understand and support seed system development. Learn more about tools for seed systems. Join a training opportunity with partner institutions in Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. Invest in tools for seed systems so that together we ensure an evidence-based systematic approach for seed system development. Contact us via toolsforseedsystems.org.
So that was the video about 11 tools for supporting seed system interventions. In July this year, we had a series of 3 webinars in which we elaborated more about each of these tools. And what we also explained about in that webinar is the 2 entry points that can possibly help you to look into the toolbox and find the tools or the tool combinations that would suit your particular situation. Can I have the next slide? Because these are these two entry points. It is the seed value chain and it is the project cycle. Now, which one would suit you depends, of course, on your situation. And if you are a researcher and you want to study a seed system, or you may have to come up with a diagnosis of bottlenecks in a particular seed system of a crop in a region, it's very likely that you will take the entry point, the seed value chain on the left. But if you are a project team and you would like to generate a baseline before you start with the program, or you would like to develop your M&E activities and plan, then the project cycle is likely to be more instrumental for you to find out which tools in the RTB toolbox would suit your situation. So back to this week. Next slide. The teams that are that you will see presenting in this week. We saw one team yesterday, the Uganda team, today the Tanzania team, and tomorrow the Ethiopia team. These three teams also participated in the seminar in July, where the tools were more elaborately presented. What these three teams then did is they sat together and looked, let's say, deeper into the toolbox. They went to the website and they browsed through the user manuals, they looked at the publications, and they interacted with us. And in that way, they arrived at the identification of one or two tools that they would like to become familiar with, which were relevant to their situation, and on which they thus would like. So that is how we arrived at seeing the data presented on the use of a range of different tools from the RTB toolbox. The Uganda team used two different tools. The Tanzania teams present their results on the tools that they use today. And tomorrow you will see what the Ethiopia team did to generate insights in the systems they looked at. Now, to recap yesterday, the Uganda team, they shared with us the results that they got from applying the 4-square methods and the means and change, two of the tools in the toolbox. And they actually had very little time and very limited resources. We have to say they were also hindered by Corona measures and power cuts. And well, many of you know those kind of constraints that you have to deal with. And still they were able to come up, as you could see, with very rich and insightful results. May I just recall how they, for example, told us how what they found, that the ownership of land, ownership usually by the men, explains why women and men grow different cassava and banana varieties, and how the diversity of the varieties of these crops also differ. If you want to go back to these results, you can, of course, because all these results will become available on the website, on the Toolbox website later on. Yesterday, these results of the Uganda team made Nicolene de Haan, who was our discussant yesterday, reflect on interesting parallels when looking at gender in livestock. And then also what we did today, what we did yesterday, is listen to a final presentation of a presentation of James Legg. James. And James gave us a glimpse of what might happen with the RTB toolbox in the near future by referring to the ACIVSS, the African Center for Innovation of VPC Seed Systems, and of which we, by the way, hope to get to hear a little bit more today and tomorrow. Now, that much for the recap. So we're all ready for listening to what the Tanzania team experienced in the field and what results that yielded. Over to the Tanzania team, I assume. Thank you.
Okay, apparently it is over to me. So, right. So if we could queue up the presentation, Viviana, from Tanzania.
Sure.
We'll just jump right in there. We're delighted to have the Tanzania team. They've pre-recorded their presentation, and we'll listen to that now, and then we'll have...
Hi everyone, I'm Hadija Ali, a researcher working at Tanzania Agricultural Research Institute, and today I'm going to present to you the results of the work we did on the survey, and the survey was on seed acquisition and seed sharing, and this study was conducted at 2 districts in Geita region. We work as a team, and the team comprised of Kwame Ogelo from SIP, Del Simlai, James Mkwabi, I myself, Francisca Gwandu, Eric Changa, Robert Ngongmu, and Adventina Babu, all from Tariu Kiliguru. We also receive a close assistance from Eric Delacruz from Alliance Biodiversity. And I'm going to present the first part. The second part, which is on discussion and conclusion, my colleague Kwame will going to present. Seed system and genetic gains at farm level, leading to access to quality seed of improved varieties. This also resulted into higher variety turnover and increased productivity. Roots, tuber, and bananas seed system largely informal, and this is characterized by easily propagated through vegetative parts, and vegetative seed is bulk, which is also perishable and prone to killing pests and pathogens. Vegetative nature of RTB seeds make recycling easy, leading to accumulation of pathogen within the plant. Thus, there is a challenge to establishing a sustainable seed system. It is also easy for farmers to share RTB seeds. Thus, on improving RTB seed system, it will require characterization of current patterns, behavior, and values associated with exchange of seeds. In this study, we assessed the patterns around acquisition and sharing of seeds in 2 districts, which are Geita and Bukombe. Those 2 districts are located in Geita regions, in the area of Lake Zone in Tanzania. And Lake Zone, this is a major production area for sweet potato. Farmers in those areas producing mostly yellow and white fresh varieties. But nowadays, there is an increased appreciation of these orange fleshed varieties. Most farmers grow the crops. Mostly this crop is grown by smallholder, which grow this crop in an area less than 1 acre and purposely for subsistence. Majority of farmers who grow sweet potato are women, and they also grow this crop for household food security. Men dominated, if you find men, they are engaged in this crop, they are mainly for commercial purpose. Despite of the importance of this crop, the crop is constrained by low adoption of these improved varieties, and this is why we started this study. More than 90% of seed flow are farmer-based, meaning that farmers use the seeds from their own fields or neighbors. And in Lake Zone, the area is characterized by 2 rain patterns. One is unimodal rainfall, whereby the area receives rainfall once in a year, and this one resulted into low availability of seed, which started low availability of seed in the starting of the rain season. But in these areas, farmers are willingness to pay is higher. And also in bimodal rainfall area, this is the area where they receive rainfall twice a year, and this resulted to availability of seed. But that seed is accumulated of diseases and pests. And because there is available seeds, people in those areas have a low willingness to pay for the seed. The objective of this study were to understand how sweet potato seed of released varieties and landmasses is shared among different types of farmers in the Lake Zone, Tanzania, and also to assess the linkage between formal and informal seed actors and how they could be strengthened to accelerate dissemination of new varieties and quality seed. Here we were looking at who shared with whom and understand what condition, what type of transaction, and why is it important. The main research question was, can a largely informal seed system provide smallholder farmers with improved varieties generated by formal breeding programs? Within this main objective, we developed some, within this main question, we developed sub-questions, which one is how does seeds of improved varieties and landmasses diffuse through farmer-to-farmer transaction? We were also tried to look on, are there differences in access and sharing of sweet potato seed among male and female farmers? Here, we look at relationship between provider and recipient, as well as information sharing, include variety, quality, and quantity. And then we were also trying to look at what mode of transaction dominates farmers' dissemination of sweet potato seed. Here we question on transaction type, volume, and frequency. We use the seed tracing tool, which uses a survey to describe the links between actors of seed system. And this tool is described by Kielwinger and Badenhag, 2021. We also use snowball sampling, whereby the first respondents were purposively selected with the help of extension officer and unbiased sample with whereby the first respondents were purposely selected with the help of extension officer and interviewed. This was followed by interview of either all or unbiased sample of their connections. Also, we adopted the questionnaire from the Delaki et al. 2016. A total of 159 farmers were interviewed. This include 94 female and 64 males, making a total of 158. And those farmers were aged between 19 and 75 years old. And the interview were held either at home, community area, or at the field. And more than 10 villages were covered during the survey within those two districts. We use SPSS to analyze the data, and whereby we analyze the frequency of answers to identify differences and trends in seed acquisition and provision, seed recycling, mode of transaction, and information sharing. We also use a social network analysis. We use R to map the seed flow, whereby by then we wanted to look on where seed came from and where is it going, and therefore to identify the key nodes in the system. And this is the first part. I would like to invite my colleague to continue with the second part.
Okay, thank you, Hadija, for that introduction. I'm now going to present our results and then followed by discussion and conclusions. Our first result is around sourcing of seed, and here we are looking at where female and male farmers acquired planting materials from. And from the responses, we realized that most seed is sourced from close social networks. And actually, for both male and female farmers, the main source was friends and neighbors and relatives. These are close connections. and then this followed by conservation of own seed. And those who had accessed seed from TARI, the Tanzania Agricultural Research Institute, were mostly trained seed producers. And again, when we asked about recycling, we realized there's 79 of male farmers and 64% of females say they would use the same seed in the next season. Our second result is in regard to mode of transaction and sourcing, and we wanted to know whether, how the farmers acquired their seed, whether they bought, they were gifted, or they exchanged something. And we realized that gifting dominated acquisition of seed from close relations. And as you can see there, for female farmers, we had gifting of 70% among friends, neighbors, and relatives. And the same for male, it was 83%. And when you look at acquisition of seed from seed producers, it was almost equal for female farmers, whereas for male farmers, there was more buying from seed producers. And we also looked at how the respondents shared seed. So we wanted to see after receiving seed and producing, did they share further with other people? And from this, we realized that seed was mostly again shared within with friends, neighbors, and relatives, with few farmers mentioning that they shared with unknown farmers. And this is an indication actually that the seed system is very kind of closed, and there is receiving, acquisition, and sharing of seed within close relations. And we also looked at whether during sharing they gifted the seed, sold through cash transactions, or exchanged with something. And we wanted to look at this in terms of I can say, relationship of the respondent and the seed receiver. And realized that most of seed shared by female respondent was as gifts, even to unknown farmers. That is shown, as you can see on the second the row on gifting, and you can see there was 63% of transactions to friends, neighbors, and relatives was through gifting, whereas to unknown farmers it was actually 67%. But you see, for male farmers it was the other way around, whereby 72% of transaction, even to close relations, that is friends, neighbors, and relatives, was cash-based. Whereas to unknown people, it was 100% cash-based. So there was more selling of seed among male respondents. We also asked the respondents in regard of repeat seed recipients. Here we mean that did the people with whom they shared seed, were they getting that seed for the first time, or they were coming back again? And we realized that there were more returning male seed recipients compared to female seed recipients in both districts, because as you can see, in Bukombe district, we have 88% of the seed recipients, of the female seed recipients, being first-time recipients, whereas 12 were repeat. On the other hand, for male, it was 66 first-time recipients and 34 returning recipients. You go to Gate again, you see that the percentage of repeat male recipients is higher compared to female. That is at 42% compared to 20% for female. Whereas first time recipients for female, it was 80% compared to 58% of male, which actually shows that there's limited seed conservation among male farmers, because mostly those who repeat, who go back again to source seed from where they got it from last year, the previous year, are those who are not able to conserve. The other thing we looked at was the mode of transaction by district, and we wanted to see where selling of seed was higher. And as you can see, 74% of seed transactions in Bukombe were through cash transaction, meaning that there was more sharing in Bukombe than in Gate. As you can see in Gate, gifting led at 72% of all the transactions. Our seventh result is around the dominant varieties in each district. And here we see the number and percentage of transaction for major varieties in both districts. In Bukombe district, the main varieties, that's Ukimi, which had 42% of the transaction, and Pistatu, which had 6%. These are local land races. They are market preferred, and they are mainly sold to major cities like Dar es Salaam, Tanga, and sometimes even up to Zanzibar. Whereas in Geita, the main varieties traded there, transacted there was Kabode. This is an orange-fleshed variety, improved, followed by Sanahulwa, which is a local land race. And as you can see, the other thing we realized is that there was a higher diversity of varieties in Geita district than in Bukombe, whereby we had 19 varieties mentioned in Geita, whereas in Bukombe it was 11 varieties. And this actually shows that as an area becomes more commercial, the number of varieties tend to reduce. I think because farmers tend to focus more on market preferred varieties, because Bukombe district is kind of more commercial compared to the two areas in Geita district where we did the survey. We also asked the respondents regarding the information sources, and we realized that close networks, neighbors, that's neighbors, friends, relatives, are the key source for information, followed by government extension. And again, as you can see from this graph here, men received more information than women. So what is indicated here is actually the number of times both male and female farmers received information from various sources, and you can see there's kind of more access to information than for men than for women. The main type of information shared, again, was the variety information. That's regarding new varieties, and seed is also there. So it's either new varieties or seed of new varieties. This was followed by information on good agronomic practices. Also coming in there closely for male, especially is in regard to disease and pest management. Our last result is around the seed flows. We did a network analysis whereby we wanted to see how seed moved from one entity to the next. And we wanted, this would help us be able to see how the various stakeholder farmers are linked. And I will begin with Node 2, which is the Tanzania Agricultural Research Institute, where breeding for new varieties is done, and that's where pre-basic seed of improved varieties is produced, and how to see how TARI is linked to other, the rest of the network. From this, we saw that TARI is linked to, at the moment, in the survey area, to 3 farmers or 3 respondents in Geita district and 3 in Bukombe district. But what you realize is that these are then connected to tens of other farmers. For instance, node number 13, that is a seed producer in one of the villages in Geita district. You can see he has accessed varieties from TARI, but he has so many people linked to with him. Actually, he had more than 31 node. Other people are linked to him, and some of these are linked to other farmers. And look at again, for instance, number 54. That is another trained seed producer in Bukombe district, and you can see he is linked to other nodes down the line, include number 78, number 59, who is linked to 78, number 41, who is linked to 59. One key thing to note is that the people who are numbered here are those who had more than 10 connections. So you can imagine if number 54 is linked to Tari, he has more than 10 connections. He is linked to number 78, who also has more than 10 connections. That one is also linked to number 59, who has also more than 10 connections, and down further to 41 with more connections. The other thing to note from this network is that the type of transactions, where you see, I think, the red arrows, that is transactions that were commercial, that is, they were cash-based. And the green, those are transactions that were gifted. And as you can see from, for instance, from Tari to the rest, the initial seed that was given there, it was through as gifts. And you look at transactions around number 13. Most of them are green, which means that's free gifting of seed. I can see only 4 red transactions. Go to number 46. Also, you realize that people clustered around number 46, mainly they are in, the arrows are in green, meaning more gifting. But when you look at the rest of the network, go to number 59, number 41, number 6, 130, you realize that there's a lot of red arrows showing more cash-based transactions, and those are actually individuals from Bukombe district. One thing we can note from this is actually the importance of decentralization of seed systems. If we identify key farmers in various districts with potential to be to reach more farmers, then this can be like the key links or nodes to reach farmers with improved varieties. I would now go to our discussion. We've seen that from the earlier, the first results that farmers mainly depend on close relations, close networks for seed acquisition, which shows that a decentralized approach to sweet potato seed production is actually important. And this is what has been adopted in most interventions. As you can see, farmers do not travel long distances to seek seed. Also, focusing on few seed producers strategically located in main producing areas can increase efficiency of dissemination of improved varieties. And this can be like one approach of linking the formal and informal seed systems. We also need to consider gender differences in interventions. Therefore, need to understand behaviors in seed sharing between male and female farmers. For instance, you can ask, why did male sell even to close relations, whereas there was more gifting among female? And even when getting seed from seed producers, there were quite high number of gifts. Also, the importance of farmer field days in technology transfer. If we have farmer field days within the villages and train farmers, that information is likely to reach more farmers, because we could see that information is mainly accessed through neighbor-to-neighbor interactions. The other implication is on adoption of ICT platform, for instance, seed tracker. There's need to consider gender differences on access to that information through these platforms. We need to ask whether women have requisite resources to access this platform, and can they use such a tools to acquire information. And again, still on seed tracker, because we are planning to pilot it in Tanzania, we've actually started that, working on that, is the implication for adoption of the app for seed regulatory. From what we see is that it's easier to pilot it within key nodes and then train those not trained as seed producers. The key nodes, I mean those, for instance, the farmers or the respondents who had more than 10 links. And the other thing is we see that closed networks are key to information, and then we need to think how can we link this with the extension so that people can access the information through the application, because one way of reaching the new farmer-to-farmer networks is through building the capacities of the extension agents, so that if the extensions are able to use this platform, then with time, maybe farmers can access the platform through strengthened extension services. Also, we've seen that women are less likely to recycle seed because of limited access to lowlands for seed conservation, inability to afford cost of seed production, and we need to see how we can motivate the female farmers willing to produce quality seed so that they are able to go into seed production. And the other thing is the focus on a few varieties as areas become more commercial. Of course, this is determined by preferences in major markets, but we've also seen that there is more seed transaction in the more commercial areas. So this actually means that there is that close link between the root and the seed. The root is the product that finally goes to the consumers, and so in areas where that product is moving, then there's kind of more willingness to pay and to buy quality seed. To conclude, I would like to say that given the close and small network in which farmers currently share seed, decentralized approaches of seed production seem possible. And we see that seed production is more profitable in areas such as Bukombe, where the crop is more commercial. And the implementation of seed tracker requires us to focus on key vine producers and have more awareness of how male and female farmers can be able to access information. The insight of this study shows that the value of a good diagnostics is important before developing interventions, and it can allow us to ask relevant questions. For instance, how can future interventions take advantage of the increasing number of cash transactions to build sustainable seed systems? How can we develop more effective linkages between farmers and extension agencies to increase access to accurate information? And how can we adopt ICT platforms in improving access to seed systems, or improving seed systems that also offer advantages for female farmers? There are some lessons we learned in terms of logistics or in terms of working as a team. The importance of having a great teamwork from design to manuscript to the development. We've worked as a team all the way from when we visualized this up to now, up to even as we continue working on the manuscript from this, and we learned a lot working together, which is different from what we've done before. And also the toolbox, the RTB toolbox has a wide array of experts who are available to assist. We are thankful to input from Eric of Alliance for Biodiversity and SIAT, who, although he was on vacation, came through in terms of assisting on different matters, especially on the network analysis. And also important to note that survey tools can evolve following the initial data collection and can change. We would like to acknowledge RTB program for funding, Dr. Enrique Kulembeka, the Center Director at TARU Kilguru, for encouraging the study and allowing TARU researchers to participate, Our extension officers who assisted in sampling and field logistics are led by Mtatiro Nyandizi in Bukombe district and Daudi Lutema in Gita district. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Now, to discuss this presentation, we're going to hear from George Sonda. He is an agricultural economist at TARI, which is the Tanzania Agricultural Research Institute. He's also the head of technology transfer and partnerships. So we're delighted to have you with us. And so let's hear from George Sonda now.
Okay, thank you, Bentley. Yes, first of all, I would like also to congratulate the team for the very interesting results of the socioeconomics, which is very important in making the value chain move or adoption of technologies. I have few remarks also on this, or I want to add some. How do we sustain the seed business of these vegetatively propagated crops? Because as you can have seen the results that most of farmers that they said they would continue with the same seed next season. So this poses a challenge on making seed business sustainable. So on my view, I was thinking that more effort is still needed to enhance this vegetatively propagated business sustainable. One of is to have a strong linkage with the value chain actors so that we can open up a market for the outputs of these seeds, because you know seed demand is actually a derived, that if such kind of seed have demand, then people would come back to buy seed. So marketing of output is critical to make this sustainable. But also policy advocacy is also critical, that if we advocate for diversification or utilization of these products into other products so that they can create demand on the seed. As we have seen that when Kwame was presenting, you found that in areas where sweet potatoes were, seed were commercial, few varieties were preferred. So in this regard, I was also thinking that we explore further and include policy issues on diversified utilization of these products from the markets where few varieties were preferred, so that we can create and stimulate demands for seed. So another thing I was thinking that TARI, we are responsible for developing a pre-basic seed, but if the demand is not, so how are we going to do? So I was thinking that TARI also produces other classes of seed so that we can also compete with these seed producers. Maybe some customers have confidence with TARI on seed sources. So those are my few remarks on this at the moment. Thank you, Bentley.
Thank you, George Sonda. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your remarks. So before we move into questions and answers, let me again just briefly remind all of our team members from Tanzania to turn your cameras on, and when you're answering the question, we'll spotlight you. Right. So with no further ado, we have a question. This question is from Jacob Walla, who says, question from Norway. How are the planting materials of sweet potato managed and conserved at Tadi? Is it on farm or is it in cryo preservation? That is at minus 96 degrees Celsius in liquid nitrogen. And there's another question. Are there methods in place to clean the cuttings from virus and pathogens? And a third question, how can we encourage community seed banks to use this toolbox? So we actually have three questions, one on cryopreservation, one on methods to clean out virus and pathogens, and then one on community seed banks. So we're going to ask Kwame Ogero, the team leader, to designate team members to answer these questions.
I will ask Hadija to handle the first question, which was around conservation and production of pre-basic seed at Tari. I will handle the second question on cleaning, virus cleaning, and indexing. And I think the third one should go to the team of I think Jeff, Connie, and Margaret, because it's more specifically on the toolbox, the tools and community conservation. So Hadija, if you can answer the first question.
Thank you, Kwame. Yes, Charlie, we have the mandate of producing these improved varieties, but also conserving these varieties. So we are conserving these varieties in the clean house. Since we are working with farmers who will regard as commercial seed producers, and there is a time where farmers do grow sweet potatoes. So during the dry season, between April to June, we are conserving this in the clean house. And after, also we are multiplying this planting material by using a hydroponic system. So we are multiplying, making it at bulk so that farmers can get it during the planting season. And for the method for cleaning, we have started using indicator plants, Ipomea sotosa, for cleaning our planting material for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adija. I will add on to what Adija mentioned regarding cleaning. One of the things that she mentioned we are doing now is doing on-station screening too. That's like a simple screening for clean materials, or materials we can say are clean. But however, SIP has built regional capacity for production of clean seed for virus cleaning at the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, plant quarantine station in Nairobi. And this is serving as a regional hub for virus cleaning and production of clean virus tested starter material. And it's also a Jam Plus Sim conservation center for the region, for the entire of Africa. So Manari is in linked with KFI. So when we need appeals that we need, and what we get, and then we multiply further.
Jeff, I think that we have some connections problems.
Okay. Right. Well, if we have a connections problem, perhaps we could wait a moment. And why don't we turn the floor over to Professor Fetian Abai. She is going to discuss the presentation. So we can listen to her, and then we can go back into the questions and answers. Okay, so we're delighted to have Fetian Abera here with us today, and she's going to discuss the presentation. Then we'll get back to the questions and answers.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I would like to have my PowerPoint. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be part of this process. I have seen the study made by Tanzanian experts. I'm very much happy, and the result was very interesting because it shows the opportunities for cash transaction, and also the investment is already there, and they have shown us also the seed supply network is already available. I have seen also the openness of the farmers for new varieties, especially they introduce the yellow, and the willingness to pay. There is an access issue, and willingness to pay by farmers is a very important component of the findings. And they are very active in multiplying and supply of plant materials, and partners in validation of new varieties. And also they are diversity minded. We get more when they deal with the food security, household consumption, there is richness, and when they are qualifying for market-oriented trades, the richness get reduced. But they are also productivity-oriented, and we have seen also the resilience character of the system. So when I talk about farmers-based seed system, it means according to FAO, it's really what farmer system not. It's, naturally integrated. It operates in a very integrated and also locally organized activities. Next, please. Farmers' entitlement to seed. We have really to see farmers as a partners, not as a beneficiaries, because the diversity of traditional seeds saved by smallholder farmers is really a time-tested knowledge, and the farmers are the foundation of the life, and they have more than a source of use and history, the culture handed down to ancestors. We have seen the division of tasks of the household. Maybe some of us may consider as a separate household when the researchers presented about female and men preferences, but I understood it. They have a division of tasks, but they make decisions together. The women were more on culture and food security, and the men were on marketing. So the seed is treated as a commodity, and it is also farmers' basic right. Seed is a business, seed is also a development. We have to see the farmers' basic right, and seed are seen as first link in the food chain and the repository of life feature evolutions. Next slide, please. I would like to use the opportunity to share my experiences, because the small grain in Africa and elsewhere, they are very much related to RTB crops. You may get surprised because, of course, they are not bulky, they are not perishable, but in relation to the opportunities offered for commercial business, they are similar. So a breeder working in such kind of marginal or mountainous conditions, we don't get so much commercial business investors to be partner with us. So our partners are the farmers. The farmers are the reliable partners. I would consider them like they are also private investors to their own right. You can see how heterogeneous the area. This is from Tigray and Wollo neighboring region. The woman is from Wollo, and the man, to his own right, had recognized 2 varieties. Actually, the one down, I use that variety as a parental line. Next slide. See this one, the result. The variety is one of the variety released for quality, nationally released. It's named after my name because the farmers like it. It's high nutritious, high beta-glucan, iron, zinc. The variety was also selected, made decision by the women experimenters together with the breeders. You can see in the field they were making choices. And finally, this release variety becomes outperforming and also very much preferred by consumers in the urban areas. So this is a result of single cross of 2 local parental lines. You can see how much the system is very rich. And we have 200 progenies, and this is one of the 6 varieties that we have released. Next. It is also possible to validate the farmer's knowledge through joint experimentation, not only the way we always did it, using quantitative and qualitative survey and evaluations with men and women farmers, but we took all their decisions to the laboratory, and we had a PhD students. Actually, this article was featured in a crop science, and we validate their knowledge. So we learned that they have a very big knowledge embedded in the system that has never been touched. Thank you. Next. Look at this crop, a native to Ethiopia. And you know, this is a single cross again with the local varieties. And there is no international organization working on TEF. It's solely produced and also improved by Ethiopian breeders and farmers. It is also a cash crop. It's growing over 3 million hectares, and it's preferred than other cereals for marketing, 30% of the produce, but the formal seed system is offering only 12.4% of the seed demand. So you can see how TEF is becoming very influential. So we need the farmer, we need their knowledge, we need their environment, we need also the way they do it to know. Next. This one is also, it's not an improved variety. It's a local variety in the northwest part of Tigray. And we have also seen the social seed network, and we find out different positions of farmers. They serve as access providers, adopters, and they were also bridging farmers, guardians, and also even to the extent there, this is my variety. Some of the varieties named after the farmer, and they have a very big, you can see this man is a proud man. He used his variety for over 30 years. He has different varieties. Even during the previous war, he migrated to Sudan. He has to travel with a handful of seed. That's what he really told us, and we are so impressed on his activities. There are so many farmers like him partnering with the breeders around that area. And I just want to bring to your attention how the farmer-based seed system is quite useful for breeders, quite useful also for people who would like to make a business. And sorghum is very known for its high lysine nutrition, and it is a component of breeding in African, Asian, they are using for its purpose from Ethiopia. Next. Of course, we are not only working, we are not only involving women only for a study base, we make also decisions with them. I was so impressed when I did my research with this woman, different in different crops. I would like to bring to your attention a woman in the middle of the last row. She is really investigating rice as a new crop to their system. But the farmers, they don't know how to use rice. They never grow it, but the government has pushed and the research centers has pushed to use it because the area was highly waterlogged and production was very low. And they really had a very big production, but they don't know how to consume. And the farmers again complained, please take this wheat. We don't need it. We don't know how to process the food. But the woman came to experiment on different food type, adapted it to Ethiopian pancake and so on. Finally, the crop is recognized in Ethiopia as a revolution, a crop for the revolution of change, you know. It is because of the woman who really matters for the domestication of a crop. But this kind of findings, this kind of knowledge has never been really reported in a very deep and scientific way, so that experts working on such kind of areas lack information on this issue. Next. Yeah, finally, what I would like to raise is, of course, the farmer-based seed system has weaknesses. It has so many weaknesses, but we need to study this system, how they function and what kind of weaknesses they have, the way the Uganda researchers did on cassava and banana, and also today, the Tanzanians also present. We need more kind of study to understand what is happening in the farmer-based seed system. I observed so many criticisms against the farmer-based seed system without knowing it. How can you criticize something without knowing it? I have observed so many opportunities inside. You can also consider those farmers as a farmer breeders. There is marketing going on. There is a cash exchange. There is also in-kind exchange. There is also a resilience component. There is also even a very rapid turnover of varieties because of the challenging climatic conditions they always face. So we have to study. This is what we are lacking. So the formal seed system does not necessarily address the challenge in the supply of the seed. You can see from the figure, we have the demand, the supply is always higher than the demand. You can see the bigger bar graph is in favor of the most promoted varieties. We call them firstborn crops because they are favored by so many donors, so many investments, and maize and wheat. The distribution for maize is higher because of the active involvement of private companies, big private companies. But even for the self-pollinated crop wheat, you can see the amount distributed and the supply is very low. It never catches the supply. It never catches the demand of the farmers. So you cannot also talk more on the food security crops, which represent the largest part of dryland marginal conditions, like what we said on RTB. We need to focus. This is a very important indication for the RTBs and for such kind of crops growing in marginal conditions. So we have to really better cherish the value of farmer-based seed system and not only aiming to extend the formal seed system. We should not aim to change it because it exists there, it will continue like that, but what we are looking for is for horizontal complementary and giving recognition, identify and trying it, and also empowering the farmers. So it will make farmers partners rather than beneficiaries. Let us not really consider farmers as a beneficiaries, and we pump down our demand, and we ask farmers to be involved as a growers. Rather, we recognize farmers as a partners. We use their knowledge, we use their capacity. We also use our capacity to address a complete success in the seed system. So thank you very much. I appreciate the researchers who are dealing on this area. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Fethiye. That was a very enlightening presentation. So we're going to go back to a remark that Kwame made earlier. Recall that one of our questions from Jacob Walla in Norway was, how can we encourage community seed banks to use this toolbox? And Kwame said that's a question more for us, the leaders of the toolbox. So not to put anyone on the spot, but does anyone from the coordination team want to answer that question about community seed banks using the toolbox?
Hello, Jeff. Yeah, this is Jorge Andrade. I can address that question. Yeah, I think the main message is that the toolbox is really designed for practitioners, scientists, extension workers, but not really for farmers. So the results from using the tools eventually will help to design better interventions. But the toolbox at the moment, the methods that we are using in the toolbox they are not really designed for farmers. So that is probably the main message about how to use the toolbox, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jorge. Right, we have a question from Margaret McEwen, who says, how do we maintain varietal diversity, which is important for mitigating risk and to meet different objectives as commercialization of sweet potato increases? So Tanzania team, Kwame, who will answer that? How do we maintain varietal diversity as the sweet potato becomes increasingly commercialized?
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I will request Dr. Sonda to chip in because he had started saying something in regard to that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes, I was thinking the way to maintain variety diversity is through exploring the market niche for different utilization of various or different varieties of sweet potato. In that way, the variety preferred for a particular utilization will be maintained. That's what I can say. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thanks for that. We have a question from James Legg, who asks, why was there such a big difference in access to information for men and women when most of the information was just coming from neighbors, friends, and relatives?
Okay, thank you, James, for that question. Actually, for that question, for the information, we asked the respondents to list the names of the individuals from whom they got information from. And then we had a row whereby they would describe who that person or that institution was. So if they said, let's say they mentioned, for instance, Kwame listing we got, you've realized that male farmers had kind of more people from whom they got information from compared to when you look at when you do the analysis, then you realize that actually male respondents had more access to information because they had even though they are relying on closed networks for information, they have more people within their networks from whom they can access information compared to the female respondents.
Okay. So that's a good answer. We have a question from Margaret McEwen, who says, am I correct to see that all the links out of Toddy are male? So on the diagram, all of the farmers who access seed from Toddy are male. Is that correct? Don't everyone speak at once. Hadija.
Yes, yeah. What we did from this network, we are trying to ask the first one, then the first one direct ask to the next one. So it's not all, they are not all men, they are the mixture, but most of them, they were men.
Okay, so most are men.
Yes.
Right? But not all. Right. James Legg asks a question. Can the network be superimposed on a map?
Okay, thanks, James, Jeff and James. I think it's possible to do that. And actually, the next phase of this, we want to go a step further and do an impact network analysis. And in that case, we like to kind of disassociate, delink the two, because the network as it is now is both districts together. So when we'll do the network, the INA, we are going to do for each district, and it's actually possible to superimpose so that we are also able to see, the different villages and where each person is located.
Margaret McEwen asks a question. How is Toddy maintaining a sustainable EGS enterprise if they are gifting?
So I'll have to take that back again to Adit. Yeah.
Yes, we saw that gifting dominating, but what we surveyed is where TAL was not penetrated before, like Bukombe. Now we are working with farmers in Bukombe, but before TAL was not there. So, and so by that way, gifting is for more local varieties, not improved varieties. But one of the way of ensuring that this can be a seed, a sustainable seed system is create awareness. Because if farmers are aware of using improved varieties and the risk of using contaminated seeds, they can use clean planting material. And this clean planting material, they are coming from TARI.
Jeff, I would also like to ask Eric Changa to comment on that, because Eric comes from a different TARI center, Tumbi, which has actually kind of done some good business in terms of seed production and selling. So Eric, please, if you can share your experience on how you've been able to do your, seed business in TARI Tumbi.
Yes, please. Carry on.
Yeah, I think sharing of SP, sweet potato, in case of orange, in our region, Tabora, I think in sharing of sweet potato is more demanded, like to what I'm sharing in West Zone about improved variety. Was not settled.
Okay, I think we've maybe lost Eric Chung. Eric Chung.
So, yeah, anyway, Jeff, I wanted Eric to speak because the Centerway is working on art, has actually made some good progress in kind of the last 4 years in terms of sweet potato seed production, which was not their mandate crop. And they've been able to kind of do more awareness creation within the communities surrounding the station. And then, reaching out to different individual farmers, and then talking about the benefits of quality seed. So they have farmers from around the station who source seed, who buy from the station, but they've also been able to reach out to many other institution buyers from that area. So they have a diversity of customers. And the other thing is that I think it was Dr. Sonda who mentioned, so for them, they have actually gone a step down further in that they're not just producing pre-basic seed, but what also I can term as certified seed.
Super.
Hello, Jeff.
Oh.
Sorry, maybe you can take one more short question and a very brief response.
Okay. Thanks very much, Nathan, for that reminder. We have a question from Antoinette Sala, who asks, how would the research results be disseminated to the women and men farmers?
Well, research results can be disseminated, like TAL, we have the section for technology transfer and partnership. This is a responsible department for transferring technology. For instance, we have different technology, like we are establishing demo plots. And as we see that demo plot is one way of disseminating technology to many farmers. So in short, I can say that.
Okay, very good. Right. Well, we are next going to turn the floor over to Lawrence Kent. He is a program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, Lawrence, over to you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I'm going to start trying to share my own screen here.
We can see it.
Okay, good. That's an old version, but I'd like to share the newer version. So let me see if I can share my own screen. There we go. Let's see if we can share my own screen now. And I believe this is it. See if that's working.
Yeah, that looks good.
You can see the screen now?
We can see it. If you click on presentation mode, that would be a little better, but we can see it. It's fine. There. Oh, that's great. Super.
Okay, great, Jeff. Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to speak briefly about some of the work that the Gates Foundation has been supporting in development of RTB seed systems and its relationship with the Toolbox. So just to start off, as others have, the Gates Foundation, for over a decade, our agricultural development program has recognized the importance of vegetatively propagated crops in Africa, and also recognized that their productivity is constrained by diseases and pathogens in the seeds that are used informally by farmers. And in many cases, farmers are constrained even by just their access to seeds at the right time. Farmers have difficulty often securing sources of seeds. And then, of course, we know about the opportunities to improve the productivity of the crops by making switches to some of the newer varieties that are being developed by the breeding programs. And but access and use of those improved genetics has been constrained by the non-functionality of the seed systems in many cases. So we've said, hey, how can we support our partners on the ground to create more functional seed systems for vegetatively propagated crops? And that's what we've been trying to invest in for about a decade. And part of our philosophy is we'd like to see really functional seed systems that can function on a more reliable and sustainable basis. So they're not temporary injections of new varieties through campaigns or giveaways of improved planting material that are sporadic and unreliable, but rather can we set up a system so that farmers know where they can every year go and secure planting material of improved varieties in a reliable way. And that means developing seed systems that are economically sustainable, that are profitable for the producers and sellers of those seeds. And therefore, those sellers of seeds are motivated to continue to make the seeds available on a reliable basis. And that's what we've been trying to move towards. And I think the seed value chain framework that's been well described by the RTB consortium is one that really describes a shared vision of what a good functional seed system looks like for vegetatively propagated crops. And that is having good linkages between the breeding programs that are breeding varieties that are responsive to farmers' priorities, but then linking them to sustainable systems to produce early generation seed, either through the public sector, the private sector, or partnerships between the two, but in a way that's economically sustainable, so that those early generation seeds are produced and sold in a way that generates revenues that allows their continued production. And then a system where there are decentralized multipliers and sellers of seeds that secure their early generation seed from those good sources of early generation seed, and then multiply them and sell them to farmers in a way that generates revenues to allow those decentralized multipliers to continue to operate as entrepreneurs and make seeds available more reliably to markets and consumers and farmers who are producing the vegetatively propagated crops themselves. So that's kind of the vision we're trying to help build towards. But I think there was a recognition that at least 10 years ago, these systems for vegetatively propagated crops were largely absent in Africa, in most places in Africa. And so our focus at the Gates Foundation was trying to find partners who are interested in building these seed systems. And that's why we made this series of investments to say, hey, is it possible to create economically sustainable seed systems for these crops? Many people were skeptical, saying, you know, farmers will never pay for planting materials of vegetatively propagated crops. But I think we've learned that that's not true, that farmers are willing to pay for clean planting material of improved varieties. And I think the data that was presented earlier on sweet potatoes in Tanzania was showing that a large number of farmers are willing and able to pay for planting material. And that willingness to pay can be translated into an incentive for the production and reliable sale of improved planting material of RTBs. So this is a suite of the projects that we invested in as the Gates Foundation, really over the last decade, to try to build economically sustainable seed systems. The best project is the one in Tanzania that served to create over 600 cassava seed entrepreneurs spread out throughout the country that multiply and sell cassava planting material quite successfully and profitably to small scale farmers. And then they source their early generation seed from private pre-basic seed providers or basic seed providers, and then those private basic seed providers source their material from the pre-basic providers at TARI. A similar situation has been established in Nigeria under the Basics Project, which has set up a series of cassava seed entrepreneurs. I think they knew there's over 300 of them now in Nigeria who are sourcing early generation seed from a couple of new enterprises that have been set up to produce early generation seed of cassava, both in the government with Umadike Seeds and with IITA with Go Seeds. And that system is becoming functional right now. And then something similar has been created for yams in Nigeria and Ghana, where IITA has supported the creation of about 10 yam seed enterprises, private enterprises that use new technologies to produce yam seed and then sell it to farmers and other multipliers. And then our investment in Sweet Gains in the sweet potato space is also taking a similar approach, trying to find ways to create sustainable systems for the production of early generation seed, largely through the National Agricultural Research Institutes, but then linking them with decentralized volume multipliers who can multiply and sell the materials, hopefully in a way that generates adequate profits to sustain those small decentralized enterprises. And then in banana, we've done some similar work, but it's a bit more upstream, where we're looking more at the tissue culture technologies that can hopefully be leveraged to commercialize the production and sale of planting material of matoke or banana. So these are the suite of investments that we've been nurturing, and we've been pretty proud of the progress they've been making in terms of building economically sustainable seed systems for vegetatively propagated crops. Recognizing there's still a relatively small part of the overall market, which is dominated by informal seed systems, but we'd like to see these economically sustainable systems to grow and flourish in the future. I'm pulling up here a slide that James Legg showed earlier, and there we go. It's showing that our plan right now is to take a lot of the lessons and progress that have been generated through the various projects that I mentioned earlier, the Yifswa Yam project, the Sweet Gains project, the Basics project, the BEST project, and then integrating those lessons under a single framework, an umbrella management organization that's really on the conceptual stage right now, but something we're hoping to support, which would be this African Center of Innovation for Vegetatively Propagated Crop Seed Systems. And it's an attempt to consolidate the lessons learned under the various seed system development projects and put them under a single home where those lessons can be further refined and further research can be done on what are the best ways to build economically sustainable seed systems. And we see this Center of Innovation really integrating a lot of the tools that are in the toolbox, but perhaps broadening the toolbox to include tools that not just to analyze seed systems, but actually contribute to building economically sustainable seed systems. And we see that being nested within this work package number 3 within the Seed Equal initiative of the 1CGIR. That will be the initiative that really focuses on building seed systems and generating innovations that can help make seed systems successful. And we see the Center of Innovation generating and consolidating those innovations, but then not actually involved in the scaling of them, but rather working with partners who hopefully will scale those innovations and share those lessons with those who are building economically sustainable seed systems. So that in some cases will be the private sector, whether that be private sector companies or village seed entrepreneurs. It could be governments who have a role to play in linking breeding to early generation seed production. And then there's scaling partners like AGRA or the African Development Bank's TAT program, which really can find ways to generate investment to fund the creation or the strengthening of these vegetatively propagated seed systems. You know, speaking of innovation, I wanted to talk about how that's really important in the Gates Foundation's approach to seed systems. And we're looking for ways to find new efficiencies and new technologies and new approaches that can make these fledgling seed systems operate more efficiently and more sustainably. And I think we're kind of grouping our innovation focus into 3 areas. The institutional innovation, putting together, you know, new institutions, whether they be businesses or government units that can make seed systems functional. Technical innovations, there's a lot of opportunities to incorporate new technologies to reduce the cost of multiplication of vegetatively propagated seed materials. And then marketing innovations. We realize that for these systems to work, demand has to be assessed, demand has to be created, and those who are selling seeds need to be aware of how to market them effectively to increase sales and to generate revenues to fuel the systems to make them sustainable. So I just wanted to mention a few of the examples. Institutional innovation, I think this is something that we've been doing through the programs we've been supporting through our partners, saying, hey, is there a way, for example, in Cassava to link breeding programs to early generation seed companies? Such seed companies, for example, in Nigeria really didn't exist for Cassava until recently. But through programs that we support, there's been the creation of the IITA Go Seeds entity as an independent entity. That's a new one that's producing and selling a significant quantity of early generation seed of cassava planting materials. And then the creation of Umadike Seeds as a government seed business that focuses on the production of early generation seed of cassava and yam seed. And so I see those as institutional innovations. Tari's mentioned there too, because of course Tari is in the process now of trying to create an early generation seed unit that would be managed more independently in a way that it can manage its own revenues and use them to sustain its production of early generation seed. So these are examples of institutional innovations that are being tested through our partners, and I think showing some great promise. Technical innovation, there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate new tissue culture technologies and rapid multiplication technologies to make it easier and cheaper to produce larger quantities of planted material, particularly at the early generation seed stage. This is an example from yam and using new technologies in hydroponics and aeroponics to more rapidly produce single node cuttings that can be translated into larger quantities of yam seed. And that's being employed now by seed businesses in Nigeria and Ghana. Also in the area of marketing innovation, for example, for many, many years, actually for decades, new cassava varieties in Nigeria and in most countries around the world were marketed with their official names. Catchy names like IBA 980581 or IBA 961632. There was a realization that seed enterprises have a lot of difficulty marketing varieties that have such long and difficult names that farmers can't remember. And so an innovation that took place in Nigeria was the government finally agreed that official names could be more catchy. And so promotional names were developed like Dixon or Farmer's Pride or Fine Face for new cassava cultivars. And that makes it easier for the cassava seed entrepreneurs to promote, market, and even advertise for those new varieties, and trying to convince farmers to buy those new varieties that have these memorable names that describe, in some cases, the characteristics of the varieties, such as Sunshine, which is a high vitamin A or yellow variety. So a lot of room for innovation on all three of these levels. And I think that the RTB Toolbox offers tools that can help in the development of these sustainable systems and can bring innovations to bear into creating more sustainable seed systems for vegetatively propagated crops. I noted yesterday that a lot of the tools in the toolbox are really analytical tools, so analyzing seed systems, but there's also a need, I think, for tools that help for building seed systems. And I see there are some, but there's probably room for more to come into the toolbox as we move forward. And I'm citing just this as my final slide. This is an example as an additional type of tool that might be considered for the toolbox in the future. And this is a recently developed manual for seed yam production and hydroponic systems. It was developed by the YIFSWA team, and it's actually a working manual that could be used not by a researcher, but by an entrepreneur who wants to create a yam seed business in a place like Ghana or Nigeria. And it has step-by-step procedures about how to set up the technology and how to build the business. And I think this is an example of an additional tool that can be useful in the toolbox for supporting those who want to create economically sustainable seed systems for the production, the delivery, and sale of planting material for the roots, tubers, and banana crops. So I'll close there.
Okay. Well, thanks, Lawrence. That was a great presentation. Thanks for that. We don't have much time, but we have and we've got a lot of questions. Your presentation has generated a lot of interest. We've got time to take just a couple of burning questions. We have one from Jan Lowe, who asks, in the case of cassava and other VPC seed systems, how much has the willingness to pay for quality seed been driven by demand for the roots or tubers of a specific variety in the fresh or processing markets?
Oh, in the case of, thanks, Jan. In the case of cassava in Nigeria that I'm most familiar with, there is huge demand for cassava already. There's a huge market for cassava, for gari production. And, currently, or for decades, farmers have been producing and selling the majority of their cassava production. So I feel like there's already a vibrant market for selling cassava. There's new processing industries producing ethanol and gari on an industrial level that add to that demand, but simply artisanal demand is quite strong already. And as a result, farmers know if they produce cassava, they can sell it. But then the question for them is, where can they get access to high quality planting material? And our hope is that one of the sources now are these cassava seed entrepreneurs who produce and sell the planting material. And what they've found is that they have no trouble selling the planting material, that the willingness to pay is out there, particularly for new varieties. In Nigeria, farmers have older varieties, but when there are some of the more productive varieties that they're having trouble getting their hands on, when they see a cassava entrepreneur who's selling that particular variety, they are willing to pay for it. And the farmers who are producing have found that it is a profitable business. In Tanzania, as you know, because of high disease pressure, farmers also have another reason, not just to buy seeds, which is not only to buy seeds of new varieties, but also to buy clean planting material, because they realize that their existing planting material often is infected by cassava brown streak variety, a disease. And so if the cassava seed entrepreneurs have not only new varieties, but varieties that are grown in an isolated way, that are certified to be disease-free, that also helps motivate sales.
Okay, super. And then one last question this is from Margaret McEwen, and she asks, innovation, institutional, technical, and marketing innovations. How do you see the role of social innovations in seed systems?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what that means exactly. I think we take the social context as for what it is, and farmers' willingness to pay, and the way farmers produce and sell and market their vegetatively propagated crops. I think we're trying within that social context saying, how can a seed system to be developed that meets those needs, and primarily to meet farmers' needs for planting material that's of the right variety, that's pathogen free, and that's available at the right time of the year. I think that's the primary purpose of developing the seed systems and putting them within that social context where they can then add value.
Okay, super. Well, we've come to the end of our day. And so I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, especially the Tanzania team for your excellent presentation. Thanks also to Connie, who started us off, and to George Sonda for his remarks, to Fetian Abera, and to Lawrence Kent for your presentations. Thanks very much. So tomorrow we'll be back at the same time, same place, and we're going to hear from the Ethiopia team. They'll be talking about potatoes, and they've used the multi-stakeholder framework analysis to study the potato seed system in Ethiopia. So we hope you'll join us tomorrow for the final day. Remember, those who attend 4 of the 6 sessions will receive a certificate. So Margaret, Connie, Jorge, does anyone else want to add anything else? If not, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.